The Acolyte may have been a divisive Star Wars show, but most agreed that the lightsaber fights, and this guy in particular, were pretty awesome. So Hasbro put out the Stranger's Helmet a few episodes into the Acolyte's first, and apparently only, season, and it went gangbusters. The helmet sold out immediately, but it also came with a hitch. It's going to take a year plus to ship. What? Well, we have zero patience, so we're making our own, and we're going to share some of the finishing techniques that we used along the way to make this a very easy helmet to finish. Let's go! Let's start with the obvious, that this helmet is 3D printed. I got the files from Galactic Armory, and the printer I use is a Bamboo Lab P1P. Not sponsored by Bamboo Lab, but I love this printer. It prints super fast. I use Elegoo's Black PLA because it's cheap and it works awesome on this printer. Link down in the description. The glue up here is relatively simple. I used 5-minute epoxy on some parts, and I used Starbond super glue on others, and I use the accelerator to kind of lock things in place. But while I'm finishing some glue up here on the video, let's talk about filament and cost, because I'm sure that's going to be the first question. This helmet used less than one roll of filament. I used about 930 grams. Mainly the dome part took a lot because of the way I had to orient it, and it used a lot of supports. And I printed everything at 15% infill. I probably could have gone 7 for some of the parts, but better safe than sorry. And then total print time came in just over 48 hours. I will say the hardest part about gluing this helmet up was the teeth. This little front teeth piece didn't quite fit the way I hoped it would, and then when I put in the upper and lower teeth, they didn't quite fit snug in that front piece. I used epoxy just because I wanted it to stay, and then I couldn't really hold it in place very well, so I had to find some clamps and just kind of MacGyvered this thing together, but it ended up working out in the end. But now let's pivot to finishing, and let's talk about using some resin. This is standard resin you would use in a resin printer and a chip brush. Why am I doing this? Because I don't want to just sand and lose all the cool details in this helmet to get rid of layer lines. So the hope here is layer line hiding, so then we can jump straight to primer and paint. Put them in the sun to cure, but we still ran into a problem. Even after a couple weeks, this thing was still tacky. So somebody recommended trying some alcohol, so I had some 70% isopropyl alcohol on hand, and I just kind of gave the helmet a good rub down, and then threw him back in the sun.
All right, Darth Thieves. Back to the sun with you.
That worked like a charm, so it was on to sanding. And let me just say, this Surf Prep 3x4 sander has been a game changer when it comes to making helmets. These foam pads are so awesome at doing these curved helmets and keeping all the detail but not ruining things. And once I got the sanding done and all the teeth brushed, we got them wiped down with a wet rag, and we are ready for primer. Even if you end up buying a color that says primer plus paint, don't trust that. Prime everything first. I love this automotive filler primer. It just works great. Give a couple solid coats, light sanding, and you're ready to rock. And then for this guy, I wanted the teeth to be black underneath, so we painted his teeth black. Come back over that after the paint cures for a couple days and tape it off, and that way our teeth will stay black and we can move on to our copper color. I went with a Krylon Fusion hammered copper to see how this would look, and after my first pass I was a little bit unsure how this was going to go.
That's coat 1. We'll give it a minute so it doesn't bleed.
But a couple coats later, and this stuff actually worked great. I thought this came out perfect. Looking nice and copper, it was time to move on to the detail, and I am going to use some Rub and Buff. I got this 3-pack off Amazon, link down in the description, but I started with the black, and I was probably trying to be a little bit too careful here, and I quickly realized that it's actually okay if I go over these crack lines because it'll kind of give it a cool burnt effect anyway. So if I was a little bit too excessive, I was able to quickly wipe it away with a paper towel. But I really like how this black is looking so far. Forgot to take the tape off the teeth, so we got that, and then it was time to move on to the pewter. I couldn't decide on silver or pewter, but I thought I'd start with the darker stuff first, and I didn't even use the silver. The pewter I think looked great, but just dabbling on the finger, put them on the teeth, leaving black in the lines and along the top and bottom, and I think it's looking great. Then we moved back to those cracks that we turned black, all the weld marks, and this time I tried to be a little bit more careful and just kind of hit the top of each weld mark with the pewter really lightly, and again, this worked perfect. With our detail work done, it was time to move on to weathering, and for this, I just make a wash. I use water, a little bit of black acrylic paint, and then I just brush it on and wipe away with a paper towel. There's a lot of nooks and crannies and cracks in this helmet, so you got to make sure you get all that stuff in there and turn it black. As I wipe, I would kind of dab in different directions and swipe in different directions just so it gives it a good aged, black, dirty Star Wars effect. If it's in Star Wars, it's got to look grimy, and this thing is looking perfect. And then to seal them up, I use a Minwax polyurethane, and this is a warm satin, because I don't want them to be too shiny with the gloss, but give a couple coats of that, and there we go. My brother happens to own a haunted trail down in Winterset, Iowa, just outside of Des Moines, so we threw this guy on a mannequin and put him on display. We've got a Smuggler's Alley section, which is kind of our homage to a galaxy far, far away, and the stranger fits right in, looking creepy and awesome in the corner. If you guys like what you saw here, please check the video that we've got queued up. I make all kinds of nerdy Star Wars stuff, and like, subscribe, all that fun stuff. All right, bye!